Hi everyone, welcome to the third lesson on this course, how to apply the base colour. So let's get to it. The first thing we'll do is apply a painterly style brush that gives us a base effect. We need the brushstroke to be interesting, so find one you think matches your style. You won't find my brush in the default brushes Photoshop offers you, but you can make your own or you can download some online. Create a new layer underneath the line art. Select a base colour for the background. In my case, I'm going for a turquoise, as I think it complements the oranges and the yellows I'm going to use later. Choose your own tone and paint the background loosely. I'm going to mix it with another tone that's a bit more bluish, just to give it a hint of colour. You can do the same, or you can even mix more colours. But remember to do this carefully, make sure it's still harmonious. An important detail is to name the layers appropriately as you go along so you don't forget where you're painting. The next thing we're going to do is change the colour of the line so we can then blend it in with the paint. To do this, press Ctrl U and open the hue and saturation window on the line layer. Then select Colorize and adjust the saturation, hue and light values until you get the tone you want. I recommend you use a complementary tone to your base so you get a contrast. In my case, I'm going to select this orange-red. I'm going to try duplicating the layer as the line is quite faint. But I wasn't really convinced, so I won't keep that. But this trick might be useful to you for another time. On a layer above the background, we'll select colours and loosely paint all over the drawing. It doesn't matter if you go over, because they're just base colours. Just be careful your painting isn't too chaotic. As you can see, I'm using an orangey tone for the skin and a red for the hair. And now I'll start with the warm tones. Gradually, the design gets warmer as we go adding the base tones. If you've gone over in some places, that's okay. Just grab the eraser. In this phase, you don't have to be so meticulous. I'll paint the eyebrows a little bit darker than the hair. I think dark colours always look good for the eyebrows. The oranges will obviously be orange, but I'll use a tone that has some yellow in it, just to contrast. Now, with the lasso, I'll make a quick selection of the coloured areas to adjust the tones to ones that interest me more. This is interesting to do in this stage so you can adjust the colours towards the ones that really work in the scene. You don't have to select the correct tones from the very beginning. The great thing about Photoshop is that you can adjust them however you like. You just need to have a good eye for colour. So the first thing I'm going to select is the skin. I want to make it slightly darker and give it a more orange tone. As you see, I'm just doing various tests to see which tone adjusts better to the skin and the scene. Then I'll modify the tone of the hair. After testing out some tones, I think I'll add some intensity to the red hair. Now I'll use a soft brush to sketch light shadows on the drawing. To do that, I'll create a new layer on top of the base colour and set it to multiply mode. I'll then try out a few different tones until I get an intense purple to apply for the shadows. Purple tends to be ideal for applying shading in multiply mode, as it blends all the tones really well, and you end up with interesting colour ranges. Most artists use purple. You can try out different tones if you like and make your own range. I'll lower the opacity of the brush so that the shadows are soft and light. As we're sketching, we don't need to be very precise. But what we do need to establish is the main light source, so we know where the light is coming from. This is something that you decide if you want it to come from above, below, from the left, or from the right. In my case, the light comes from the upper left and it highlights the girl's face. So I'll have to bear this in mind when I position the lights and the shadows. Now I'll create a new layer, but this time in soft mode. We're going to apply the lights the same way we did with the shadows, all over the drawing with a yellow tone. Yellows are tones with lots of light, so they're usually great for lighting. But as I said before, feel free to experiment and see which colours you think fit in with the scene. With a painterly style brush, I'll correct small areas where the colour has gone over and it's incomplete. We'll gradually become more precise with our drawing, and we'll start polishing the shapes. It's good to start cleaning up the design at this point to save us work for later. When we get into the painting more, it's good that the drawing is correct and all the base colours are in place. So I'll paint the eyeballs with a light colour. I don't like using a pure white because if we want to add a shine, we can't do it on a pure white base. Be careful when using pure white or black before the final stages of colour. If you use those colours, you'll need to compensate the contrast in the rest of the drawing. They're visually heavy tones. I'll use a green colour for the iris. I'll just do some tests and I've ended up with a sky blue that fits in better with the background. It also contrasts well with the red hair colour we used. You need to consider these kind of things when you're applying colours. Don't just use random colours. Use your intuition and think of which tones the drawing requires. At the moment, I think it's interesting to use the colour of the hair for the pupil instead of using black. It's nice to add some fantasy colours to things like this. Shadows don't necessarily have to have black in them, for example. Now I'm going to paint the lips with a darker tone than the skin. If you observe people's lips, you'll see that they're slightly darker. Try out different tones using the colours you have in the design with the eyedropper tool and select the ones you find most interesting. What I'm going to do now is apply some shadows, but in a different way to how we did it before. So I'll select a soft brush from the brush panel. And the difference is that now, instead of setting the blending mode to multiply, I'm going to set the brush to this mode. The result is slightly different, as if we adjust the mode of the brush, then the tone we're using will always stand out a little bit more. Try out the difference yourself. So I'll start applying some shading to the eyeballs. Now I'll set the brush mode to hard light, and with a yellow tone I'll apply light to the face. See how saturated the colours are and the strong light on the left area of the face. Now with the brush in soft light, I'll add some light touches to the bangs. The hair also has this light, so we'll do the same here. I think the tones we have are really interesting, and we've achieved a broad colour range that will be useful in the following stages. We'll make some small adjustments with the brush in normal mode and fill in some areas or maybe erase others. Select with the eyedropper tool and paint. You might have to change the brush you're using. That's up to you. It depends on the result you want. With the brush in colour mode, we can select tones and cover larger areas with a specific colour range. If you lower the opacity of the brush a lot, you can get really nice results. In my case, I'm selecting reds from the hair to make the face rosier. The next thing I'm going to do is set the brush to multiply mode again and intensify the shadows in some areas, starting with the hair. See how the shadows I apply are very dark. so I have to be careful not to make it too intense. The more intense the design is, the more you'll have to contrast the rest of the tones so the contrast is balanced. The last thing I'll do in this phase is paint the orange slice that she's wearing as a hairpiece. I'll set the brush mode to normal and select the tones of the oranges I already painted. And our base colours are now applied. In the next lesson, we'll see how to add the different shades of colour and paint with a painterly style brush. So I hope you enjoyed this stage in the course, and I'll see you for the next lesson.